Hello, George Hepworth, Grover Park Consulting. Are you an experienced Access developer wondering how to take your skills mobile? In this series, I'll show you how I'm replicating the Northwind Developers Edition template from Access step by step into PowerApps. There are challenges in doing so. Designing for mobile is quite different in some ways from designing for the desktop. Access supports bound forms. Bound forms are linked directly to the data in the underlying tables. That means that when you perform actions in the form itself automatically interacts with that data, creating new records, reading records back, updating existing records, or deleting records as required. Unbound screens in the mobile world don't have that power. The developer writes all of the code which handles all of those basic CRUD operations. VBA is very powerful. The programming language in PowerApps, called PowerFX, was written by design to be low code. In addition, VBA allows us to reuse code. For example, if you write an error handling procedure, you only need to write that error handling procedure in one function or one sub in one module. That same code does not have to be copied and pasted or rewritten to be used again. That concept does not exist in the PowerApps environment. That means if you need the same error handling in two places, you have to write it in two places. There is an advantage on the PowerApps side, and that is the ability to create responsive screens for PowerApps as opposed to the static forms we have in the desktop Access environment. That means the same screen can be designed to run on a smartphone, a tablet, or in a browser. By the way, Northwind, the Developers Edition, is a complete, although not terribly complex, application. It's complete enough to be useful both as a learning tool and as a starting point for your own application. In the same way, I do not intend to create the Hello World type of demos in the PowerApps world. We'll go straight into the same kind of model that is the basis for Northwind. Who is this series for? I envision my primary audience being Access developers of various skill levels, various levels of experience, who want to branch into PowerApps to expand their toolkit. I also welcome PowerApps beginners who want to build more complex apps, such as the Northwind Developers Edition. My goal really is to help you develop a hybrid developer skill set to navigate both the desktop and the mobile environments confidently. What is the Northwind Developers Edition and what is it used for? The Northwind Developer Edition showcases major features of Access. It is not designed to run a company nor show you how to build such an application. It's intended to be a model which you can study to learn how to build applications. Northwind itself is a fictitious trading company whose customers are independent grocery stores. Within the business model, customers call in orders or place them over the internet. Northwind invoices orders, ships orders, collects payments, and closes orders. Purchase orders and inventory management are also included, and there is sample data in the template to help you get started quickly. The key entities are products, orders, purchase orders, companies, and employees. Now, orders, of course, consist of the order and the details in the order. Purchase orders consist of the purchase order, it's the header, and the purchase order details. Again, it's not a complex, complete model, but it's complete enough to be useful as a learning experience. What's included in this phase one? I set out to create the CRUD operations, creating, reading, updating, or deleting records, orders, purchase orders, products, companies, and employees. There are other sorts of operations which could be included in a more complete, and actually are in the Access version. Those I will defer to a later phase. I also set out in phase 1 to replicate most, if not all, of the data validation. Give you an example of that. We can't create an order without a customer. So customer ID is a required field. That's a very simple, basic example. The data model itself enforces referential integrity. That kind of data validation is handled both in the database engine and in some places in the logic in SQL Server. Data validation also covers the sequence of operations. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, when you create a purchase order, you have to submit it before it can be approved. You can't approve a purchase order unless it's already been submitted by the originator. It can't be closed until it has been paid. So that sequence of operation is enforced through data validation, again, in the SQL Server behind the database. And there is considerable logic in stored procedures to manage inventory levels. What is deferred? Reporting is the main thing. Access has a very powerful reporting engine. Not so much capability exists in PowerApps, although simple reports can be written. Image handling is another area where I found the challenges of doing it in PowerApps a little bit more than I wanted to tackle in this phase. Image handling is pretty routine in the Access world. I believe that once I get a handle around what I'm doing, I'll come back and figure out how to handle images better in the PowerApps world. But I decided to defer that till later to avoid drawing out the process unnecessarily. And in the future, we will look at multi-user logic. As designed, the Access template is single user, and phase 1 mirrors that. However, as we all know, a complete complex application is going to be deployed to multiple users. And so the logic to handle the permissions and the roles and so on will need to be added at some point. The tools and the development environment that I employed in this project. Of course, there's the original MS Access template, which is available through the Access application itself. That was the original starting point. In addition to that, I used PowerApps in the mobile interface. I moved the data from Access tables into SQL Server as the data source for 2 reasons. The primary reason is that PowerApps do not connect to Access tables. So that's a non-starter. I chose SQL Server over some of the other options, such as SharePoint lists or Dataverse, because I felt more comfortable with SQL Server. I have more experience. And 2, I knew that I was going to write a lot of the logic in the application using stored procedures in SQL Server. That logic was originally written in VBA in the Access version, and I wanted to handle that logic with stored procedures in SQL Server because I know it is capable of doing that. And again, I felt more comfortable writing that logic in stored procedures. This is not a drag and drop PowerApps build. You couldn't do this out of the box with the typical 3-screen template that you get in the PowerApps world. It emphasizes code structure and even reusable patterns. I know I just got through saying that PowerApps does not support reusable code. It does not. But there are ways to implement design patterns which make reuse a little less of a foreign thing in PowerApps. And I'll show you that in later videos. What you can expect in the next video. The next video will give you a side-by-side comparison of the Access and PowerApps, those parts of the application which are replicated in phase one, which are primarily the CRUD operations and the data validation. I'll talk about some of the real-time challenges I encountered. I've mentioned some previously. I'll go into more depth in those, and the design decisions I made in order to address those challenges. The goal here is not just to clone a single app. I didn't just set out and say, I'm going to make Northwind. I set out to create a reusable approach to designing a more complex application. And that has implications both in the interface and in the database, the SQL Server database, the stored procedures, where the logic is implemented. I not only welcome feedback on your builds, including the adaptations or improvements on my pattern, I actively solicit it. This is a work in progress. I'm trying to create a design pattern that I think can be useful for Access developers wanting to learn how to build PowerApps. To that end, your experience is just as important as mine. Your knowledge and expertise are even more important in reaching that goal. So in the next video, a walkthrough of the Northwind Developer Edition, a request that you leave your comments, suggestions, examples of your own implementation or improvements on the video here and in subsequent videos. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video. And finally, an acknowledgement. This entire project has been co-produced with AI, assisted intelligence in action. I have used both ChatGPT and Anthropic's CRUD throughout this project. And by that I mean during development, I tended to rely more on CRUD for code and design insights. I felt like CRUD's, for lack of a better word, personality is a better mesh or a better match for my personality. I relied more on it for code. For this series of videos, I relied more on ChatGPT for brainstorming and design, but obviously not for copy editing. Assisted intelligence is part of how I work now. I highly recommend you give it a try.